Hi, so on today's video we're going to be sharing 12 tips on how to knit, love and wear all the knitted pieces that you make for yourself. And I'm so excited to be sharing this with you because as I was going through some of the older stuff that I have in my wardrobe that I've knitted over the years, I noticed that there was no way I was going to wear some of those things even back then because they were not a fit in my wardrobe, in our culture even. And it wasn't really something that I could wear without looking all costumey, but I knitted them anyway because I enjoyed the techniques, or somehow I liked the pictures that I saw. So today I'm going to be sharing 12 tips with you on how to knit all the pieces that you're going to enjoy wearing and really get the most out of. So let's get started. Point number one, you have to know your body shape. So this is one of those things that sometimes we don't want to talk about or deal with, but the truth is there is no single body out there that is suited by every single thing that is made in the fashion world or in the knitting world even. So you need to understand that our bodies are different and there are certain things that are going to suit you better than others. And even though you can knit the other pieces because they're trending and you like them, but at least 80% of the stuff that you knit, particularly for yourself, should really work well with your body shape. And you can always knit all those other pieces for other people. So I'll talk more about that later in the video on knitting for other people. So the first thing that I want to talk about is that you need to understand what suits your own body. For instance, a few years back there was a trend for these cropped pullovers. They don't work well with me, and I noticed that they really look great on people with a shorter torso, but I am not shaped like that, so they don't work very well for me. And even though I like them, I could knit them for myself because they were not going to work in my wardrobe. And there are certain things that I've forced myself to buy because I like the look of it, particularly, you know, those white legged pants, but I'm too short and I kind of feel like I'm drowning in them. And to be honest, I've only worn them twice, but when I bought them, I already knew that this wasn't really a look that would work for me, but I still bought them anyway. But on the other hand, when I wear straight linen pants, I wear them like crazy. So at the end of the day, I think we all know what really works for us and what doesn't. And that also applies to knitting. And seeing that we invest a lot of money and time in knitting our pieces, it's very important to focus mainly on things that will really work and suit your body. And then you can also knit the other pieces maybe for other people, or just have a few of them just because you love them. There's nothing wrong with that. Okay, so that's the first tip that I wanted to share with you today. And then the second one is to take accurate measurements as often as is necessary. So you'll notice that there are some people whose bodies fluctuate a lot, and if you want to knit a garment, for example, you need to take your measurements maybe just before knitting that garment. Or if your body doesn't change, you can take your measurements every once in a while, and you know that your bust size is this size and your arm length your bicep isn't going to change, it's not going to fluctuate in terms of upper arm circumference. So if you're like that, then you're sorted. You just need to take your measurements every once in a while. And I think the most important thing is to ask somebody else to take your measurements for you. And if you're someone who really understands measuring and the fashion designing stuff even better, just get that person to take your measurements for you. The reason why I'm saying that it's better to get someone else to do it for you is because your measurements are going to be more accurate because you're not going to be holding the tape measure yourself. And point number two, the other person most likely won't downplay the sizes, because most of the time when we're measuring ourselves, we want to hold the tape measure too tight because we don't want to get to a certain number. But if someone else is doing for you, then it's easier to just get the measurements that are as accurate as possible. So that's the other important thing that you need, so that when you knit something, it really suits you very well. And then number three, your pieces should integrate with your wardrobe as seamlessly as possible. So this is a very important point, because you know what we knit is sometimes influenced by social media, what's trending on Ravelry, and what we see our friends knitting. There will be some knit alongs happening, and those things do influence what we end up knitting. But it's very important to first of all think about how will this fit into my wardrobe. So lately when I design stuff, particularly when it comes to more time consuming pieces like garments, I always think about how many items can I wear this thing within my wardrobe before I actually start knitting it. And that way I know that it will get some great use. So if I can only think of one other item that I can wear that piece with, I generally stay away from that project, because I know that it's going to take a lot of time to make, cost a lot of money to buy the wool and design and do everything, and then later on I'll only be able to wear it with one item in my wardrobe. So it's important to at least make sure that whatever you knit integrates well with the rest of your wardrobe, so that you can get the most out of those pieces at the end of the day. So that was point number 3. So I'll be looking down at my notes just to check if I'm not missing out on anything. Number 4, you have to learn to modify patterns to suit your body. So no matter how talented a designer is, it's impossible to design something that will fit every body shape and every body out there. For instance, let's say you're looking at a 40-inch bust. If you were to put all the people that are at a 40-inch bust in front of you, you'll notice that they all have very different bodies and they all look different. So when you're knitting, it's very important to make sure that you know how to modify a pattern. So one interesting thing that happened to me all these years before I started knitting, I didn't know that my arms were really very long. It's not something that I knew, because it's not something that you can tell just by looking at my arms. But then I noticed that whenever I stuck to the pattern, my sleeves would be too short and I'll keep tucking them just to get them up to the wrist. So I had to eventually learn that I need to work at least 1.5 inches longer than what the pattern says, so that my sleeves can fit very well. So I'll also put up a picture right now with my sister Leslie modeling the paw pullover. As you can see, the sleeves are very long on her, and you can see they are kind of creased at the bottom because they were too long, but they fit me just fine. And because someone else was wearing them, they looked too long. And you know what, still on that note, I only learned that when I was knitting some other patterns, and then later on I made a mistake when I was designing a pullover. I think it was about 5 years back, and I wrote the pattern based on my sleeve length, and the first 2 testers that managed to get to the sleeves early were saying to me, well, I'm still working on the decreases, but the sleeves are already too long, because I was working based on my own sleeve length. So as you can see, it's very important to understand your own body and how it works when you're wearing garments, so that you can actually modify where you see fit. So that's another important one. And I think there are classes and there are books that you can use to do some research. There are patterns, of course, where you'll find some notes on how to modify, but this is one of those things where you really need to take some time to do some research or attend classes or even do online classes. And then that was number 4. The next item that I wanted to talk about is how you wear your pieces can make a difference. So on this point, I've noticed that there are some items that do not look good when you wear them in a certain way, or where you wear them with something else, but then you just switch out some stuff in your wardrobe and then they just seem to fit better. So as I mentioned earlier, that I do not generally knit cropped pullovers. That was so true. I don't get to knit those cropped pullovers because I don't have the body shape for it. But I've noticed that if I do happen to wear or knit one, the best thing for me to wear it is with a flared dress, basically a dress that's fitted at the top and flares out. And that way they look much better if I wear them with such than with jeans or pants or anything else. So that's the other important thing, that you have to know how to style those pieces and wear them in a different way. So I'll also put up some pictures to show you what I did with the tattoo pullover that I launched recently. So with that pullover, you'll notice that if I wear it with a skirt, it still looks good, but I have to fold it at the bottom so that it doesn't really hang too low. I was wearing it on this picture with the maxi skirt, but it looked perfectly fine because the ribbing was folded and it just sat very well above the waist, so it didn't really overwhelm the whole look because the skirt is long and it's got a lot of fabric, but when you fold it, it just looks much smaller and it sits very well on the body. And on the other hand, when I was wearing the same pullover with pants, I had to wear it long with the ribbing like hanging down just on the hip area. So you'll notice that it's a very different look, but it works very well because these are two different garments. The other one is a flared skirt with tons of fabric, and the other one is just a pair of straight pants. So the way you style your pieces also makes a difference. And if you're not sure of how to style, you can even look at styling videos on YouTube and see how these professional stylists put together and style pieces. You'll be surprised to see how much you can do with just one piece in your wardrobe. So take some time to look at that. And then the next thing that I want us to look at is use colors that you enjoy wearing. So there are a lot of times that somebody will knit something and not wear it because the colors they used were not something that they love. So I'll also put another picture again of something that I knitted and didn't like the color of. So when I did this shrug, it was nice to knit. I enjoyed it and I loved the yarn when it was sitting on the shelf. That's why I bought it, but it didn't really work for my wardrobe, and I think I only wore it once and I gave it away to somebody else. So it's very important to work with colors that work for you. And mostly when people are talking about working with colors, it usually gravitates towards neutrals, and that's not the case. If you like pinks, just make sure that you knit in your favorite pink shades. If you like blues, purples, whatever color, or you like neutrals, just work with the colors that are going to really be an integral part of your wardrobe and that you're going to enjoy wearing without necessarily dreading putting that piece on or taking it off before you leave the house. So it's important to really work on your colors and to work on the colors that you love and knit your wardrobe so that it works well, as I said earlier on, and integrates well with the rest of your wardrobe. So here's the next point. Do not alter the design that you're working on out of boredom. So this is going to be a bit of a weird one, but you know, back when I used to knit and I wasn't designing, if I got to a certain point in a garment and I got bored, I would add a stripe or introduce another color or do something really weird that would ultimately affect the look of the piece, and most of the times I won't want to wear it afterwards. So I noticed that I used to do that quite a bit and just add something. But it's important, of course, to add stuff and modify if it's really going to make a difference in the final look of the piece. But it becomes a problem if you're just adjusting stuff because you are bored. For instance, you crop a cardigan or a pullover because you're bored with it instead of knitting the full length that attracted you to that piece in the first place. Or you crop the sleeve, you do a short sleeved version instead of doing a full sleeve pullover or cardigan or whatever garment that you're wearing. It becomes a problem. And that's the same even with wraps. You knit it shorter and all of a sudden you can't wrap it around yourself as much as you would have wanted, and it becomes off-putting because you wanted it to look a certain way and now you've changed it because you were bored and you just wanted to finish the project. So the best thing to do is to rather put it aside, do something else. If you only work on one project at a time, rather do something else that's not knitting and get back to it tomorrow or later on. Or if you do work on different projects at a time, pick something else and work on it, but take your time to actually finish the project and not crop it or cut off the sleeves or cut off the length, whether it's a shawl or it's anything else that you work on, or it's a hat. Don't shorten the brim because you just want to get to the end. Take the time and actually work on the garment or accessory that you know you'll actually want to wear. So that's an important lesson that I learned the hard way a few years ago. And then the next point that I want to share, because I've forgotten what number I'm at right now, is go to the shops and try on sweaters so that you can decide on the measurements that you like. So I've really used this one and it's worked well for me, but I'll start off with a disclaimer. if it's not allowed in the shops where you, whichever country you're shopping from, so please don't do this. But if it is allowed and you can try on and do whatever, then that is fine. So what I personally do is I would go and try on some sweaters, and the best thing is to avoid those machine knitted ones that are knit with super thin yarn that's like a thread, but just go for the ones that you've got really thick yarn, like what you'll use when you're hand knitting. So what I do is I try some sweaters on. For instance, I go for the raglans or the drop shoulder pieces, and I try them on with whatever it is that I would like to wear them. If I have to try on with other pieces in the shop, that is fine. With jeans and with the shoes that you normally wear, just make sure that it's as authentic to what you really wear as possible, and then see which size suits you best, because you'll be surprised. Sometimes you may think you need to knit a 42-inch bust or a 32 or a 38-inch bust, but then the sweet spot for you is 40. So it's very important that you take your time and try those pieces on and see what really works for you. And then when you've tried them on and you see the pieces that really, the size that really works for you, take the measurements, measure the chest, measure the sleeve length. If it's a raglan, measure from the underarm to the end of the sleeve or to the beginning of your ripping, measure the ripping, so that when you have those knots, you can work with them instead of just following the pattern. And then in that way, you'll get the exact measurements that really make, that have the best sizing for you and that make the sweaters that you love the most. And it's a very quick way, instead of doing a trial and error, to try on an already finished garment. And even some pieces may be in your wardrobe. It doesn't have to be stuff that's in the shops. You can try on pieces that are already in your wardrobe. If those sizes are ideal for you, remember things like sleeve length will vary depending on the design that you're doing. If it's a certain sleeve, it's going to be different from the raglan or the drop shoulder. So you need to try those different constructions and see what really works best for you. And that way you'll get the sizes that are ideal for your body. And then the next one now is, do not just focus on the techniques that you enjoy wearing. Sometimes you need to focus on the finished product itself. So this one was a tough lesson that I learned as well. I love knitting cables and they've been my favorite technique since forever. But there was a time when I was just knitting super cabled stuff that I didn't like wearing. I'll put a photo of a coat that I did some years back, more than 12, 15 years ago, I think. It was from a vintage pattern. And okay, I honestly knew that I wasn't going to wear this, but I just wanted to knit the cables. So that's one of the challenges that are there sometimes, that you just like a technique, you like lace, you like cables, you like color work, but deep down you know that this is not something that you would really wear. So sometimes it's important to even knit something that doesn't bring you as much joy, but that you know you are going to wear. For instance, a lot of people are always talking about the black stockinette pullover that they knit in the wardrobes but never knit. And that is true. Sometimes you just need to take some time, you know, work on that pullover. You're going to thank yourself later because you'll give it so much wear and love, and it's going to be an integral piece in your wardrobe. So sometimes it's important to take the time and knit those pieces that are not so interesting. Knit that sit stitch garment or accessory, because if it's a look that you want and you love, even if the knitting may not be as enjoyable as some highly engaging techniques, you'll still get to enjoy wearing it. Because remember, with some of these sweaters, you can wait for 10, 20 years and pass it on, or even longer. So at times, it's important to consider the product instead of the process. So that may not always be the case. Sometimes we just want to knit for the sake of the process, and that's why I mentioned earlier on that it's good when you knit for the process, just do stuff for somebody else instead of yourself. That is great. You can still enjoy the process. But sometimes if you really need a stockinette sweater, don't deny yourself the opportunity to get one because you don't like the process. Take the time, knit that stockinette sweater. You're going to enjoy it and you're going to love wearing it. So the next point that I want to share is, take your time to work on the finishes. So mostly when we knit and we're done with the project, if you're like me, you are so sick of it, you don't want to see it anytime soon. And I've noticed that I sometimes kind of feel tortured by a project by the time I get to the end, to an extent that I don't even wait the first few days or a week or so because I don't want to see it. And I've noticed that sometimes I used to neglect the finishing because I would be too exhausted. It's very important to take the time to work on those finishes, because finishes are the ones that, you know, give that statement look to your knitted piece, whether you're going for a classic look or you're going for a boho chic look, or whatever aesthetic that you like. When you actually take the time to work on the finishes, you get to do those things that make that piece yours and that personalize that piece. For instance, say you are more into the classic finishes, you can take your time, even if it's not written in the pattern, you can take your time to do a folded neckband. It just gives it that neat and sturdy finish. Maybe add some elastic to give it even more stability. Those are the finishes that will really give your piece some extra fine look, some chicness, or whatever you want to call it. And you can replace your ribbed band with a double knitted band if you wanted to give that super clean look, or you can even add things like a fringe or some tassels if you are going for the boho chic look. Add some sequins or bead for that look. So it's all those things that you do at the end of your knitted, when you're done knitting, or add some fancy buttons if you want to give it an expensive, exclusive boutique look. So all those things really make that piece extra special. And sometimes we neglect them and have some ends hanging from the sleeves or from the side of the garment, and that takes away from the look of the garment. Even if you've done a great job knitting, great tension and good stitch work, those finishes make a difference, and they are what will make you reach for that garment even more. So take your time to do that. And then the last thing that I want to talk about is know your style. So this one is very important for us knitters, because sometimes I sit down and think, oh, I haven't knit lace in a while, or I haven't knit this technique, or I haven't knit this type of design, and I feel pressure sometimes to knit something because I haven't done it, and I want to keep my skills, you know, as wholesome as possible. But I've learned an important lesson, that it's important to know your style. For example, I don't like large shawls, but I still knit them because my sister likes them, and whenever I design and knit a large shawl, she's the one that gets to have it at the end of the day. And I get to play around with color as well. But when it comes to these one skein shawls, I love them. I knit them for myself, and I make them as colorful as possible so they can give color to my wardrobe, add some life to those winter pieces. I live in a very warm climate, so I don't need thicker accessories to stay warm. This is just enough even in winter. So those are some things that you also need to understand when you're knitting. You don't necessarily have to be stuck with one style that might end up boring you, but sometimes you can just knit certain things because you want to knit them for just to enjoy the process, but for other people. I don't like wearing hats, but I knit hats for my husband. He works outdoors, so he knits the hats, and I knit them for him. I knit hats for my kids. I knit hats for my sister. She loves accessorizing her outfits with them. So you still get to enjoy the processes, but without necessarily doing that for yourself. But when it comes to your own stuff, you need to know your style and knit those things that you know work with the style that you have and are going to be part of your wardrobe still, even if you may not necessarily enjoy the knitting process that much, but at least you enjoy wearing them. So those are the 12 points that I had for you today. I hope you'll be able to knit all the stuff that you love, and those things that you don't love, knit them for your friends and families, and you'll still get a wholesome knitting process. You'll still get some wholesome knitting enjoyment out of all these things that you want to knit, but you won't necessarily be stuck with items you don't like because you wanted to experiment with a certain technique, or you wanted to try a different color than what you normally wear. You have your wholesome knitting experience, and at the same time knit, love, and wear all your knitted pieces. Thank you so much for watching this video. Bye bye.